Moving on into section 2, talking about research on stratification today. So, on Google Classroom, you will find some double work to do there. So, make sure you answer 2 of those questions before the end of the day today so that you get full points for that. Okay. So, Eric Olin Wright is an American sociologist who explored key changes in the United States' class structure and inequality over a 50-year period. He was influenced by Karl Marx, and he helped to form a group of scholars known as the No BS Marxists, who used empirical evidence to test Marx's ideas. So in the 1980s, Wright realized that the growth of the middle class challenged Marx's view, which only saw society as divided between owners and workers. So, Wright argued that the upper middle class people, like managers, weren't just workers, they also controlled the working class while being controlled by capitalist owners. So these managers, he said, were both exploiting and being exploited. So Wright identified 3 key aspects of control in modern capitalist production. 1, control over money and investments. 2, control over physical production, the land, factories, etc. And 3, control over labor power. So capitalists control all of these, while workers control none. However, there are groups in between, such as managers and white-collar workers, who hold contradictory class locations, according to him. These people have some control over production, but they lack the full control that capitalists have. They sell their labor like workers, but have more influence over their work environment than blue-collar workers. Wright believed that 85 to 90% of people fall into this category of selling their labor, and within this group, 2 factors determine class: their relationship to authority and their skills or expertise. Middle-class workers, like managers, often have more authority than working-class employees, helping capitalists control workers. They also earn higher wages and get promotions, but remain under the control of capitalists. So in contrast, workers with in-demand skills, like IT specialists, might have more power because they can earn higher wages and are harder to control. Later in life, Wright shifted his focus from the middle class to studying the democratization of the economy and the ruling class. All right. Okay, so the upper class in the United States includes the wealthiest 20% of households, those who earn over $207,400 annually. Most people in the upper class are wealthy, but not super rich. They likely own large suburban homes, maybe even a vacation home. They might drive an expensive car, travel abroad, and send their kids to private schools and colleges. For many in this group, a significant portion of their income comes from salaries, and this group includes professionals like doctors, lawyers, and university administrators. It may also include some highly paid professors. At the very top of the upper class are what we call the super rich. All right, so we also refer to this sometimes as the upper class. So these are people earning over $7.8 million a year, which includes about 250,000 Americans. Their wealth comes mostly from investments in stocks, bonds, real estate, and the interest income from those investments. This group includes celebrities, professional athletes, corporate executives, successful investors, and those who have inherited large fortunes. A 2017 book by sociologist Rachel Sherman found that the super rich and those in the top 1% are very aware of their privileged position, some giving generously to causes like the arts, hospitals, and charities, and their homes are often luxurious and filled with valuable collections. Unlike previous generations of wealthy Americans who proudly displayed their social status, today's rich tend to downplay their wealth, though there are exceptions to that particular norm. So, such as the Snapchat CEO Evan Spiegel posing for a photo here in LA, belonging to that upper class. So wealthy individuals often attend the same exclusive private schools. They sit on corporate boards. They belong to the same private clubs, tending to donate large sums of money to politicians, and are often on a first-name basis with members of Congress or perhaps even the president. However, their reasons for donating might go beyond simply influencing politics, as many of the wealthiest are sensitive to how others view their lifestyles and work hard to show they are morally responsible. This can involve downplaying their wealth, minimizing their privilege, and making gestures to try and give back to society. The turn of the 21st century brought huge opportunities for wealth accumulation, particularly through globalization, as entrepreneurs who could invest globally benefited by selling to foreign consumers and using low-wage labor in developing countries. The information revolution also played a major role, with young entrepreneurs in tech companies like Sergey Brin of Google and Mark Zuckerberg of Meta amassing incredible fortunes. In fact, 12 of the world's richest billionaires are under 30. As a result of globalization and the tech boom, the number of super rich Americans has soared in recent years. After World War II, there were only 13,000 Americans that had $1 million or more. Today, the 400 richest Americans are worth a combined total of $4.5 trillion, a 40% increase from the previous year. Unlike old money families such as the Rockefellers or Vanderbilts who built their wealth over generations, much of today's wealth is held by entrepreneurs like WhatsApp co-founder John Kuhn, worth $11.7 billion, and Bolt co-founder Ryan Breslow, who is worth $2 billion. Although Americans have long admired these wealthy elite, opinions of the super rich have shifted in recent years, especially the 2007-2008 financial crisis and rising income inequality, sparking movements like Occupy Wall Street, where protesters accused the rich of greed, corruption, and undue political power. And a recent Pew Research poll found that 6 out of 10 Americans think there's too much economic inequality, and 7 out of 10 believe that the system unfairly favors the powerful, as nearly 2/3 of Democrats support higher taxes on the wealthy, while only 36% of Republicans agree. A billionaire. And that's where people kind of get pretty upset, I think. All right, so the middle class is a broad group that includes people with various jobs and lifestyles, earning stable or sometimes significant incomes from white-collar and blue-collar, skilled blue-collar jobs. It typically refers to households earning between $42,000 and $126,000, depending on family size, and makes up about 50% of all households in America. While the middle class was once mostly white, it's now much more diverse, with African Americans, Asian Americans, and Latinos becoming an important part of it. The middle class grew steadily throughout most of the first 3 quarters of the 20th century. In 1971, about 61% of U.S. households would have been considered the middle class, but this number has been shrinking for the last 40 years. So for a very long time, most Americans identified as middle class, partially because of the belief that the U.S. has few class divisions. Many people didn't want to be seen as too rich or too poor. Since they usually interacted with people from their own social class, they felt similar to those people around them. But in recent years, economic changes have shifted this view. In a 2015 poll, 47% of Americans identified as middle class, which was down from 53% in 2008. The middle class can also be further divided into the upper middle class and the lower middle class as well. So, how did Eric Olin Wright's perspective on the middle class challenge Marx's original class theory, and what does he propose as a solution to account for the complexities within modern class structure? So he observed that the expansion of the middle class in American society complicated the binary class theory of Marxism to just owners and workers. He introduced the concept of contradictory class locations to capture the nuanced role of the middle class individuals like managers and professionals who both exert control over some aspect of production but are still controlled by capitalist owners. That perspective integrates aspects of Marx and Weber's theories by acknowledging the middle class's partial authority and skills as a distinct class factor. Okay, so the upper middle class includes highly educated professionals like doctors, lawyers, and professors, as well as mid-level corporate managers, small business owners, and some large farm owners. Their household income ranges from somewhere between $126,000 to $188,000, with the lower end of the range including jobs like college professors, and the higher end including corporate managers and small business owners. Okay, so it is worth noting whenever we're talking about college professors, these are college professors that write books. Okay, it's not your average Ivy Tech ISU college professor. They're not earning that kind of money on a regular basis, right? Unless they're writing books, and those books are being used in classes, right? So my favorite thing is whenever you attend a college class and you have to buy 4 books from the professor, right? So that's how you pay him literally twice. Anyway, so I'm sure you'll have that happen at some point if you go to college. So anyway, about 19% of American households fall into this particular category. Members of the upper class are typically upper middle class rather are typically college educated. They usually have advanced degrees, meaning graduate or doctorate degrees. They tend to own more comfortable homes, drive expensive cars, have savings and investments, and many are also involved in local politics and civic organizations. And while they enjoy a high standard of living, they don't have the same luxury or social connections as those in the upper class. Traditionally, their jobs are more secure with benefits like retirement and health plans, but upper middle class people, especially in fields like finance and media, have faced layoffs and seen the wealth from pensions and home values decrease in the past couple decades as well. Okay, so the lower middle class includes trained office workers, teachers, nurses, salespeople, police officers, firefighters, and others who have or provide skilled services. About 40% of American households belong to this group, making it the most diverse of the social classes. It does include college-educated people with modest incomes, like public school teachers, as well as well-paid individuals with only a high school diploma, like skilled tradesmen, like plumbers, electricians, etc., and senior civil servants. Household incomes for this group range anywhere from $31,000 to $100. So anyway, that's more of a misprint, but still. As of 2016, 36% of people self-identified as lower middle class. Lower middle class members may own modest homes, though many of them rent. They drive relatively new cars, but not necessarily super expensive ones. Most have at least a high school education. Some have college degrees. They hope their children can attend college, though this usually requires work-study programs and student loans. Politically, they are typically not very active beyond voting. Like the upper middle class, the lower middle class has seen its job and financial security decline due to economic shifts over the years. For example, the global recession, the economic downturn from COVID-19, especially amongst lower middle class workers, has caused unemployment rates to spike. And many professionals could work remotely during the pandemic. That wasn't an option for all groups, though. However, the American Rescue Plan provided $5 trillion in government spending, helped to prevent a major recession, and supported vulnerable workers. But by the end of 2020, unemployment had decreased to 6.7%, and by early 2023, it dropped to around 3.4%. Okay, so the working class primarily consists of blue-collar workers like mechanics and pink-collar workers such as clerical aides. Household income typically ranges from somewhere between $20,000 to $40,000, and at least two people in the household usually need to work to make ends meet. This income is usually just enough to cover rent or mortgage, buy food, and maybe save for a vacation. People in the working class work in jobs like factory workers, office work, sales, restaurant or hotel jobs, as these jobs offer modest pay and little control over wages and working conditions. According to a 2017 Gallup poll, about 30% of Americans identify as working class, and many of these jobs, especially in manufacturing, are at risk due to globalization and technological advances, leaving many workers feeling uncertain about their futures. The working class is racially and ethnically diverse, as older working class people may own homes purchased years ago, but younger workers are more likely to rent, often in lower income neighborhoods. The cars they drive are usually in a lower priced older models. Politically, working class people tend not to be super active, though they may vote in elections. Children from working class families often skip college and go straight into work full time after high school, but finding a good job is tough. For high school graduates, the unemployment rate is 3.9%, and median weekly earnings are just $853. For those who didn't finish high school, the situation is much worse, 5.7% unemployment, and median weekly earnings of $682 a week. A study from Rutgers found that only 16% of high school graduates from 2009 to 2011 that didn't attend college were working full-time by 2011. The rest were either unemployed, looking for work, or trying to increase their part-time hours. For those who found jobs, the median hourly wage was only $7.50, about 25 cents higher than the federal minimum wage. These poor jobs prospects made it hard for them to plan for major life events like starting a family or owning a home, and most of these high school graduates expect these milestones to be many years in the future. So the lower class, which overlaps with the working class, to account for about 29% of American households include some full-time, low-wage workers and those who work part-time or not at all. Their annual household income is typically lower than $31,000. Most lower-class individuals live in cities, although some live in rural areas and earn a little money as farmers or part-time workers. Some manage to find employment in semi-skilled or unskilled manufacturing or service jobs, ranging from making clothing in sweatshops to cleaning houses. Their jobs, when they can find them, are unlikely to lead to promotion or substantially higher income. Their work is probably part-time and highly unstable, without benefits such as medical insurance, disability, or Social Security. Even if they are fortunate enough to find a full-time job, there are no guarantees that it will be around the next month or even the next week. Many people in the lower class live in poverty, and very few own their homes. Most of the lower class rent, and some are homeless. If they own a car at all, it is likely to be a used car. Compared to other social classes, a higher percentage of the lower class is non-white. Members of the lower class do not participate in politics as often, and they very seldom vote. All right, so if we describe how class distinctions within the working and lower middle classes affect educational aspirations and outcome for their children, why might members of these classes face barriers in achieving higher education goals for their families? Many lower middle class families aspire for their children to attend college, but often they lack the financial resources to do so without taking out loans or work-study programs. Working class families, on the other hand, may prioritize immediate employment for their children after high school due to financial constraint. These economic barriers, along with limited access to college preparatory resources, make it challenging for both classes to ensure higher education for their children. All right, so the United States has long been the land of opportunity, with rags to riches stories like that of Oprah Winfrey, who went from being raised by her teen mom and grandmother to becoming a talk show host that's worth $2.5 billion. But is it really possible for someone to go from a poor or working class background to rise to an upper class professional? This question is explored through social mobility, which refers to the movement of individuals or groups between class positions based on changes in occupation, wealth, or income. There are two main types of mobility: intergenerational and intragenerational. So intergenerational mobility refers to a social movement across generations, comparing where children end up relative to their parents or grandparents, and intragenerational mobility focuses on how far the individual moves up or down the social scale during their working life. Another distinction is between structural mobility and exchange mobility. Most mobility in the U.S. is structural, upward movement driven by the expansion of better paid jobs. Since World War II, mobility in the U.S. has been tied to growing prosperity, but in a society with complete equality of opportunity, there would be as much downward as upward mobility. So this would be exchange mobility, where more talented people move up and less talented ones move down. In practice, no society has full equality of opportunity, So one study found that while nearly all children born in 1940 earned more than their parents, this was not true for later generations. For instance, 93% of children born in 1940 to parents with average incomes earned more than their parents, while only 48% of those in 1980 did. And it also found for children born to parents in the lowest income bracket, only 22% of those born in 1980 earned more than their parents, a sharp drop from the 88% of those born in 1950. The largest declines were amongst middle-class families, largely due to growing inequality in the United States, and economic growth in recent years has been uneven, benefiting the wealthy, while the middle class has shrunk, and economic growth can lead to structural mobility, but only if all groups share in the growth. Racial and ethnic groups experience different rates of intergenerational upward mobility. Asian Americans, for example, 26% in the lowest income bracket make it to the top fifth, compared to 11% of whites, 7% of Hispanics. 3% of Native Americans and blacks. Downward mobility is less common, but still significant, as among children born into the top income bracket, 50% of Asian Americans remain there as an adult, compared to 41% of white, 31% of Hispanics, 23% of Native Americans, and 18% of blacks. Downward mobility is most common in intergenerational mobility, such as when someone moves to a job with similar pay but less prestige. They seem minor, but they often come with psychological costs. For women, divorce can be another factor, as they are 31 to 36 percentage points more likely to experience downward mobility compared to married women. Studies also show that women who divorce, even from middle class backgrounds, often struggle to maintain their lifestyle afterwards. So, education plays a crucial role in both social and cultural capital, and it's a key factor in determining upward mobility. A classic study by sociologists Peter Blau and Otis Dudley Duncan in '67 found that educational attainment is the main factor behind intergenerational mobility. A child's education is influenced by their family's social status, which then impacts their social position later in life. William Sewell and Robert Hauser in 1980 confirmed this and added that parents, teachers, and friends shape a child's educational and career goals, which then influences their future education and job opportunities. Higher education is still one of the most important paths to upward mobility. Studies show that a college degree increases the likelihood of earning more than one's parents, with the biggest benefits for middle-class children. However, a child's access to college often depends on their parents' income. In 2016, 78% of young adults from the top 20% of households enrolled in post-secondary education, compared to just 28% from the bottom 20%. Additionally, 60% of children from the top 20% of earners graduated from college, compared to just 15% of those from the bottom 20%. So family income influences college attendance because lower income children are more likely to drop out of high school or graduate without the qualifications needed for college. Even if they do attend college, they're less likely to afford prestigious schools, which tend to offer higher earning potentials. Schools like neighborhoods are often segregated by income. For example, 37% of higher income students attend selective universities, while only 7% of lower income families do. Increased access for low income students to elite colleges would help improve their chances of upward mobility. So, in defining poverty, a distinction is usually made between absolute and relative poverty. Absolute poverty means that a person or family simply can't get enough to eat, or perhaps does not have access to adequate health care and education. So people living in absolute poverty usually do not have access to healthy food, or in situations of famine may even starve to death. Absolute poverty is common in the poor developing countries, and in many industrial countries. By contrast, relative poverty is essentially a measure of inequality. It means being poor is compared with the standards of the living of the majority. The bottom of the class system in the U.S. are millions of people who live in poverty, and many cannot maintain a proper diet and may live in neighborhoods marked by high crime rates, exposure to dangerous environmental conditions, and run-down, dilapidated homes. Poor persons are more likely than their richer counterparts to suffer from every possible health condition, ranging from heart disease to diabetes, and consequently their average life expectancy is lower than that of the majority of the population. Thus they experience absolute poverty. But unlike in many countries in the developing world where poor people do not see much affluence around them, in the U.S. the poor are aware of the prosperity around them. Therefore, they must live with both absolute and relative poverty. Okay. So the United States government calculates the poverty line based on the estimated cost of living for the families of different sizes. In 2020, for a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children, the poverty line was set at an annual income of less than $26,246, or just under $2,200 a month. This measure, created 60 years ago, was based on multiplying the cost of a basic food diet by 3 to estimate total living expenses. However, over the years, the cost of housing has increased much faster than food costs, leading critics to argue that the official measure underestimates the number of people living in poverty. Research shows that 75% of families earning $15,000 annually spend over half of their income on housing, and additionally, the poverty measure only accounts for food costs and overlooks other essential expenses such as housing variations by state, taxes, medical costs, and child support. The official measure also doesn't factor in government assistance programs like Medicaid, public housing subsidies, or stimulus payments, which can help lift people out of poverty. So to address these issues, the U.S. Census Bureau created the Supplemental Poverty Measure in 2009. It's more accurate. It considers factors like local conditions, housing costs, and government support. However, it's used for research and doesn't replace the official measure for determining eligibility for government aid. For a decade, the SPM showed a poverty rate of 1 to 2% higher than the official measure, but in 2020, this trend reversed. In 2021, the official poverty rate was 11.6%, or 37.9 million Americans, while the SPM put it at 7.8%, about 25.5 million Americans. This shift was largely due to the temporary impact of COVID-19 stimulus payments, is the official poverty rate has fluctuated between 11 and 15% since 1960, with periods of economic growth reducing poverty and downturns increasing it. In 2021, 5.5% of Americans lived in extreme poverty, earning less than half of the official poverty line, often struggling to meet their basic needs. There you can see the poverty rate using the official measure.